What's up, everybody? Jason Williams here, and welcome to the Unfiltered podcast, where I will talk to literally anybody about any fucking thing. So, we've got coming into the live none other than Brett VDS. Brett VDS is a clinical psychologist, and we're going to be talking to Brett about all things mental health because, look, let's face it, a lot of us are maybe struggling just a little bit. Whether it's a little bit or whether it's a lot, it doesn't matter. It's just we need to get. There's a huge stigma attached to like seeking help for your mental health, and mental health is a big thing. Not gone are the days where it needs to be. You need to be shunned, or you need to be concerned, or you need to just hide your emotions and be a man, or just if you're a woman, just suffer in silence. There's help. Nowadays it's mental health is like if you've got a cold or you're sick or you got a flu, you go to the fucking doctor. If you are not feeling mentally well, you don't feel like you can get up in the morning, things aren't going well. What you got to do is you see someone that can help you with your mental health. This is a thing, and we are going to chat to Brett about this. Let's bring him on here quickly. I'm going to add Brett to the live.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, picture's fine. If you can just speak like that, I think we'll be okay.
Kirsten normally says that I shout, so it's fine.
No, you're allowed to shout. We're probably going to shout more than we should in this podcast. Are you comfortable, bro? Are you good to go? Can we jump on in with this whole thing?
Yeah, let's jump to things. We're showing we already wasted people's time.
No, people though, I think people are just interested to be. People love lives. Have you seen the cut that people are watching on TikTok nowadays? They jammed onto that thing for hours watching people doing the most random shit. So I'm not I'm not too concerned. And even if nobody's watching, I still want to do this with you because there's certain things about your profession and questions that I have that I want to get into. You know what I mean? So I'm just if everyone is watching, I do appreciate it. What I actually do want to do, just really quickly, while you are here, I just want to go on to. There's a couple of comments of people that have commented earlier that we can maybe have a look at. There's a lot of people online, all right? So I want to give a shout out to people that have been here since beginning. It's Bevan Peterson's also chatting here. Bradley Abrams, Devon Shepherd, Isel Jansen is over here. There's a lot of petrol heads because obviously a lot of people here know you from the cars that you built, right? So a lot of people that have come here know you from then and about cars, you know.
I,
So
yeah, I think, well, not cars. I think I only had the two cars that I really changed some stuff up on, but I guess, yeah, some people do know me um, through that. Well, I guess, I don't know, I can't help but I can't think of myself as somebody that's popular, done a lot.
yeah, but you see, so you were, in my mind, you did quality and not quantity. You did something and you did it right. So that's, I think, why you've got a footprint in this whole scene. And you've been in the scene for a long time, bro. It's not that you just popped up yesterday, but um, that is not what this is about. So, boys and girls, welcome to Brett. Brett is a clinical psychologist, right? And and what I've done, because I'm lazy as fuck and I'll never remember it, I got myself notes, as I always do. I always get myself some notes. So Wiki says a clinical psychology is the specialty of clinical psychology addresses behavioral and mental health issues faced by individuals across a lifespan, including intellectual, emotional, psychological, social, and behavioral maladjustment, disability, and discomfort, minor adjustment issues, as well as severe psychopathology. Bruh, those were big words. Those were seriously big words. Can you please tell us in your words what a clinical psychologist, what you do?
What is it that I do? It's such a, like, a lot of people ask, and the reality is I chose clinical psych because I essentially can work in a lot of different settings. So I can be a therapist, I can assess, forensic cases, I can essentially do research, I can go and be a counselor at the school, for example. Um, or I can go and work in a hospital, which I do, and I can then go and do assessments in a ward, for example. So my scope is very broad, and again, that's why I've chosen clinical psych, because I remember when they interviewed me back then, I actually said to them I didn't want to be limited, and that's why I'm applying for clinical psych. So I think it's quite broad, and I think when I generally tell people, in sort of layman's terms, I'm a therapist and I'm here to help people improve the quality of their life.
Yeah.
And we do that through different methods. It can be group therapy, it can be individual therapy, and it can also be through, doing awareness campaigns, for example. So there's a lot of different ways of kind of approaching this, but ultimately we're here to try and help people. So yes, we use big words like psychopathology, which basically is, in a simple way, it's abnormal behavior, or behavior that is concerning.
Okay. So psychopathology is basically if you're doing something that doesn't seem the norm, if you're acting out or doing something a little bit silly, or I don't know what the word is, and I don't want to be insulting to anybody with this whole fucking thing, but if you're wilding out for no reason and it's constant, that's psychopathology. Is that right?
Um, no, like we're allowed to be crazy. We're allowed to. I always like, for me, the Mad Hatter is like the perfect example of, people are allowed to be crazy. People are allowed to be wild. Nobody has to fit the so-called norm. But
Yeah.
when we think of abnormal, we think of like it is bordering on the lines of problematic. Like,
Yeah.
for
Okay.
example, when somebody is manic and somebody is running in the road naked, for example, that isn't
Like
considered normal
my
or okay,
oh,
because we would be worried about that, because it
yeah,
obviously does quite a bit,
of
for the
course.
person, to put it mildly.
Yeah. Okay. So if I can maybe, I think the easiest way for me to do this is I don't want to make this is not going to be about me, but I do have some experiences which I'm not looking for answers, right? I'm not looking for you to fucking therapize me, if that's the right fucking word to use. I'm not looking for therapy. But I've got sort of scenarios that we can talk about, and I'm still sure everyone in the comments has got some scenarios as well, which we're going to get to. We chatted to a few guys online. A lot of questions were asked, and we can sort of touch on those things. But before we jump into that, I just want to jump into these quickly. So,
Okay.
short of, without sort of talking about exactly what you do, right? Here's my worry about your fucking profession, right? Me talking to you now, it feels like in the back of your mind, you are fucking doing therapy on me. You are judging me. You are talking to me as if, not as if, not in an insulting way, but it's like you are, you sizing me up. Do you size people up, just random people on a regular day? How do you deal with your mother? How do you deal with your spouse? How do you deal with your friends? Are you looking at them as a therapist and normal people or as a psychologist during the whole day? Or are you always on, or do you switch off?
Um, like I think it's important to switch off. Firstly, they're not paying me to analyze them. So I'm not working. I'm like, so
Fucking
I
money.
look. So no. But to be honest, I think at some stage, like initially, you start thinking this one's a bit problematic, and you start thinking like, nah, this is not normal, or this one is drinking a bottle of whiskey during a podcast or a live, and you kind of think, nah,
Jesus.
there's definitely
No.
like,
I,
but
no, in my defense, I primed you for this. I told you what I was going to be doing. You knew this was coming.
no. So I'm not no. So for example, so one doesn't sit here thinking, oh my God, like these people have problems, because it's only when it starts affecting like other areas of life that you start thinking it's a problem. So
Okay.
no, I'm just talking shit, but like for me, for example, I think you will literally be overloaded if you sit there, thinking like your partner, why is she doing this? Why is he doing that? Or why is my mom this problematic? But I think what one thing it kind of does teach you is to be understanding and to be patient, because when somebody maybe has like an outburst, you maybe do learn that maybe it's like a sensitive space for them. Maybe it's something they're not all too familiar or comfortable speaking about.
Yeah.
So I think it learns, or not, sorry, it doesn't learn you, it teaches you how to you learn. It teaches you
Okay.
to be more patient and understanding.
We colored people here. You can come with all your degrees. You're still gonna slip up and say, "Now we're gonna learn you. We're gonna learn you." It's
Yeah,
like
no,
it's
no, no,
okay.
no,
This
no. But
this
I'm
is a
fine with
comfortable
mistakes.
space. Listen, what I want to do really quickly is just I really want to get into some of these comments because there are comments we had earlier today and comments we've got now. So I want people ask some important questions. Questions where some people might be struggling and people are struggling in silence. And ultimately, as much cuck as we talk, we want to help. So I just want to get into this really quickly. Do you remember some of the questions that we had in the comments earlier? Oh, where'd he go? He just disappeared. He just disappeared. He disappeared. I don't know what's going on. I think B has got a bad signal. Maybe. Maybe. Let me see if we can add him again. What's up, Verity? How you doing, Verity? Fabian Peterson. What is that man drinking first? What the fuck, bro? First watch. We don't fuck around here. Man's just drinking Jim Beam. Gotta drink this. Drank so much so far. This might be a problem. Let me just see if I can get this man's back quickly. Hold on 1 second. Every time he touches one side of the phone, it what? Oh, is this with Brett? Bradley Villiers, did you EFT go through? What's up, Bradley? So, yeah, we want to get on some of these. We want to actually get. I'm going to open up a lot of the questions. So we opened up a few questions earlier on that people asked that we could ask Brett when he gets on. So I'm going to pull those up here really quickly. 19 comments. Okay. So we're going to open up these and then hopefully we get him back. Give me 1 second. So I'm going to try and get him back here again. Orville Robertson soft drinks. Yeah, it's extremely soft, bro. Okay, here we go. He's joining. There we go. Are we back again, B?
What is happening is when I come into the live, then the sound switches to the phone, and I was trying to sort it out, but it seems to keep going away.
Okay, but I mean, I think everyone can hear you. I mean, I can hear you, so it sounds good. So we don't have to worry too much about it.
Yeah, the problem is I can't hear you.
At all? Can you not hear me at all?
I can hear you. It comes through the phone very softly, man. That for me is it's a bit bizarre.
Okay. Well, as
But if I
long as
take
well,
the
look.
earphones out, then you're going to hear the echo, isn't it?
Okay, you don't have to worry about it. Look, if you can hear me now and what I'm saying now, then we'll be good to go for the rest of the podcast. And if that's fine, it's going to be
It's
okay,
fine.
I
It's
think.
fine. I'll just listen.
You can bring the phone a little closer by. I just knocked the mic.
Oh, yeah,
Okay, so when we cut off earlier on, what we were going to do is we were going to chat. We were going to go into some questions. So
yeah.
one question that I had before we go into people's questions from Facebook was, I already asked you the question. I literally said, when I wrote this down, I literally said, are you psychologizing regular people when you talk to them? Right? I know that's not a real word, but you know what I mean, right? Um, One question before we jump on to people's questions. What is the difference between a therapist and a psychologist and a psychiatrist? Because there are real differences between those three fields. And who goes for which one?
So, in terms of like a therapist is somebody providing therapy. And essentially, a psychologist can provide therapy, a registered counselor can do therapy, a psychiatrist can also do therapy. I think the question generally is, what is the biggest difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist? So a
Yeah.
psychologist is somebody that goes on to study, their BA, their honors, and then their masters in clinical psych. And a psychiatrist is actually somebody who was first qualified as a doctor, and then they go on to study further as a psychiatrist.
Oh,
So all your
the way I
psychiatrists
made
are
it,
first, sorry.
sorry, you carry on.
So I was going to say, so essentially, a psychiatrist is a medical doctor, but they are focused mainly on medication, for example, and they can then prescribe medication. So, for example, I can't take bloods. I can't do. I mean, I don't even know how to take one's blood pressure, for example. But they can do all of that
I
from a medical perspective.
okay. Okay,
So,
I do get that because so I do understand that the way I always separated the two. Now I've got some experience, not personally, but um, in our family, I know that basically the way I separated the two was that a psychologist can't give meds, a
yeah,
psychiatrist can. Klar. That's what
yeah,
I knew. The one they both do a similar, they both can do the same thing, but it's like the psychiatrist can also give you medication. So he'll do the therapy and then realize that, oh no, therapy is not going to work for you and you need fucking lithium, and he give you drugs. That's how I separated the two.
so look, I mean if you want to put it plain and simple, that is the biggest difference. But we also can't play like dual. So if for example you come to me for therapist, as a therapist, I can't then prescribe medication because then I'm playing two different roles.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, people would come to me for therapy, and if that alone isn't working, we would then send that person onto a psychiatrist also to be prescribed medication. But having said that,
Okay.
not everybody needs to go and see a psychiatrist. Like you can go and see a medical doctor to be prescribed meds also, or you can see a psychiatric nurse. You don't always have to go and see a specialist.
Okay. Um, so so a little while ago, I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of it, but I went to some therapy stuff and it was free therapy. There's a what's this place's name? So this is actually for anybody, and I'll probably link it at the bottom somewhere. There's a place in Observatory, right, where you could, if you're having some trouble with something, I don't know how to actually describe it, but if you're having some serious internal conflict, right, being mental or what, if you're not coping somehow, you can go to a place in Observatory. It was cheap as fucking chips, right? It was, I think the first session was free. You would talk to these people, and then if you wanted to go back on a regular basis, it was like $50 for like an hour session, which is nothing. It is nothing in that game. I mean, if you go to the doctor, right, and you go for fucking cold or whatever, you're going to go to the doctor, you're going to spend $350, 400, $550, whatever their consultation is, plus you're going to get medication. That's what it costs. For you to go to a therapist, which is what this was, I mean, it was therapy, we were going to therapists, it's like $50. So there's a place in Ottery, I'll link it below, but I mean, that kind of help is available. And we're going to get to this a little bit later on. I want to talk about why therapy is important and why people don't need to be afraid to go, like, to ask to get therapy, because it's like having a cold. If you've got a cold, you go to a doctor. If you're not feeling well mentally, you're depressed, you go to a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, right? We're going to get to that now, but I just want to open up some of these questions. So earlier on today, I put on a quick post saying I'll be talking to a psychologist tonight. Anything you folks want me to ask him, right? So this gentleman by the name of Riley Cook, he's all he says is signs of anxiety and depression. What are the signs? Now I know that's a broad question, but if you had to key in on a certain thing, like if a parent was looking at their kid and saying, "Look, something's not this like don't look right, man. Something's not licky here." What would be parents' triggers or keys to see that the kids are maybe um, have anxiety or depression, or even they have anxiety or depression?
So Look, two things to look out for. So first of all, don't self-diagnose and don't jump on Google and start diagnosing. Having said that, because I think that's dangerous, and there's a
Yeah.
reason, to that. Google doesn't teach you how to, doesn't teach you clinical judgment. So,
Mm.
which is quite important. Having said that, it is a good guide to start looking for things, to start thinking, is this maybe present? Is my child overthinking? Are they not eating as well as what they used to? Are they,
Okay.
so is their mood low most of the time, or are they quite irritable or angry or argumentative? Um, but the biggest thing that we generally look for is how does what the person's experiencing, how does it kind of affect their quality of life? So, for
Yeah.
example, if people say, I'm depressed, but in no way is their normal lives affected, well, we generally aren't going to diagnose them with depression. So you can be
I'm so
sad.
gonna dive into that. I am so gonna dive into that and tear a whole lot of people a brand new fucking asshole. But we'll get there now. Now we'll get there now.
I think it's quite challenging because we have people that come to us, and I mean, no way I'm not trying to be offensive when I say this, but just honest is that you can't come to me and say I have depression. We have to sit down. We have to see how it is affecting your life, and
Yeah.
if it isn't affecting your life, then the reality is you don't have depression. You don't have
Yeah.
anxiety. Then you probably are facing, day-to-day challenges, which is
Yeah.
actually normal.
Hundred
Life
percent.
isn't, just great. Life is difficult. But what
Mm.
are things that we are looking for is changes in behavior. So the
Yeah.
reality is, if you're a parent, you should know that, when something's different with your child, like you should notice that your child is isolating from children, for example. You should
Mm.
notice that their marks are maybe not as good as, or maybe it's, I don't know, it's changed.
Yeah.
But those are things that parents should know. If it's your partner, you generally would notice that there is maybe some differences in their behavior. But again, that doesn't mean they are being diagnosed, because it also kind of has to affect various areas of their life, not just one or two.
Mm.
But having said that, that is what I would start to look for, and then I
Okay.
would start thinking, I wouldn't start thinking, is this depression or anxiety? I would actually start asking the person, what are the things that you're experiencing? And then I will start seeing how do those symptoms fit in with the different, what is the word, the different pathologies that we have. I mean, I have the book here, I can actually show you. So we're generally going to sit and say, which of these 1,000 pages does it kind of fit into?
Fuck. What is that book?
So,
Is that one of your
I mean,
textbooks?
so, for me, for example, you don't just think this is when a person says it's depression, we don't just think it's depression. We start
Yeah.
exploring quite a bit. And that process sometimes takes, up to 3, 4, 5 sessions just to get to the
Yeah.
diagnosis.
Yeah. Okay. So I completely 100% understand that because look, if I can just qualify this for a little bit, I'm not going to get into too much about it, but my late father was manic depressive and a paranoid schizophrenic. So I know not a lot, but I know enough about this to be able to say some shit, you know.
Yeah.
And I know the difference. Well, no, no, I don't want to say that. I don't want to say I know the difference between real depression and fucking you mad because your parents wouldn't buy you the Nikes. Now you're fucking sad. Now you want to walk around the world talking about, oh, I'm so depressed. My parents wouldn't buy. Fuck that. No bullshit. You're not depressed. You're pissed off because you're fucking entitled. You know,
Yeah.
I can draw those judgments. I know you as a therapist can't. As a psychologist, you can't because that's bad. But I fucking will. So there was a time on social media not too long ago. I'm probably talking about 2.5, maybe 30 years ago. There was an upswing in all this bullshit about everybody suddenly got mental illness. You know, everyone's suddenly depressed. Everyone's suddenly um, jumping on this mental illness bandwagon. Now, I'm never ever ever going to play that down. Some people really have real fucking problems, and it's tough to get through from day to day. It's hard. But like you said early on, you get regular, normal, day to day hard. You're getting cuck at work, you're getting cuck at home, you're getting cuck here, and you have to deal with that shit. There's a difference between that and actual clinical fucking depression. There's a difference, right? And you get people, and this is actually one of my questions that I've got here. Blah, blah, blah. So one of the questions is fake social media illnesses looking for clout versus real mental illness. Now, unfortunately, there are people out there that know when this whole mental illness thing, starts getting clout, it starts becoming viral. You jump on that bandwagon and you jump on the viral fucking trend. You talk about how mentally fucked you are. You talk about all sorts of things, but meanwhile, you're still doing you're living a normal life. Your life is going on as it always has. It's not really affecting you at all. But there's a lot of people that just jump on that whole mental illness thing because it's a good catchphrase to use. My biggest fucking issue is that you're diluting the waters, right? There are people that have got real, real mental issues that is fucking killing them inside. And you're taking away all that cuck. People are just now mental illness here, mental illness there. And it gets to a point where you're like, ah, he's, but it's gone. Where did it disappear to? Oh my goodness. I was going on a good rant also. I was going on a proper rant. Just hold on, let me try and get him back. Hold on for me. Okay, I'm adding him again. Listen, folks, I may or may not may have had one too many whiskeys before starting here this evening. Hmm. The last two comments. Okay, I'll check it out. Thank you. So it's adding again. I just think, yeah, I think Brett's got bad cell signal, and that's why it's dropping. I'm not quite sure how much of the last little rant that I had he heard. I'm still adding from my side. Okay, while we're waiting on B, I'm just gonna go through some of these questions over here. Okay, we got serious. Got a lot of questions over here. Marianne says it's good now. Bradley de Villiers says no, it was good. Give me a second. I'm going to add again. It's just check here. And I've just added again. We're adding. So there's two profiles that it's got over here. Just hope I'm adding from the right one. Didn't. B, if you're there, you can jump on again. Okay, cool. Okay, so we're still adding. I'm just going to type both here. It says Kirsten add, which I'm doing. Brett, are you there, bro? I mean, I see I'm adding you over here on the other profile you requested. Um, Adding over there. What else have we got here? Michael Trent, Bevan Pizza is starting it is standing out. He started. This is Michael. Why you like that, bro? We're still adding. I just think that Brett's possibly got a Wi-Fi issue. To be honest, I think it's a Wi-Fi issue, and I think that's why it's circling. There we go. Welcome back.
Apologies, I don't know what happened. Like you were talking and then boom, it just popped. The video just went away.
Is it?
Can I maybe just answer your question that you were
I,
speaking about?
but I didn't I said I went on a long fucking rant there about basically what if we can just maybe just backtrack. My rant in short was fake social media mental illness versus actual mental illness. What's
So,
your
no,
take
so
on that?
I mean, so I caught the gist of your of your question, and my answer to it is basically um, the reality is, yeah, it's happened. So I think there's been like a tendency to, how do I put it? Wait, sorry, maybe I think should think before I answer it because I think I'm just jumping into it. Um,
Jump right in. We about that. Just jump right the fuck in. Don't care about the consequences. Just say what's on your mind.
I think for some people, let's be honest, to an extent, yes, some of it was attention seeking. However, I think, we live in a time where, depression and anxiety is at its highest point. So
Is
if
it
I
though?
thumb suck the numbers, I'm thinking, in actual fact, I don't have to thumb suck. I think it's close to something like 70% of people within the workplace, for example,
Yeah.
are meeting not just the diagnosis, but certain symptoms of depression or anxiety. So we are living in a time where the experience of the symptoms are very high.
Yeah.
Maybe people aren't diagnosed, for example, because a lot of people are self-diagnosing instead of reaching out for help. A lot
Yeah.
of people are using platforms and saying, hey, but that sounds familiar. I meet that. And that's why I started off earlier saying, like, don't self diagnose, don't jump on
Mm,
Google because
yeah.
it's dangerous, it's inaccurate. Um, but I think we also live in a time, and again, these are one of those provocative comments where, it's kind of cool to have something. I feel
Yeah.
relevant, and I think that's one
Yeah.
of the kind of things we don't want to touch on, because when we say it, it's very uncomfortable and it seems
Mm,
somewhat unprofessional. But perhaps maybe that person doesn't reach or they don't meet the criteria for a mental health disorder, but
mm,
perhaps maybe they need some form of care, maybe they need some form of support, but it's not at a severity where it reaches certain pathology, for example. So is it a bad thing that people are doing it? I don't think it's bad, but I think it's like an unhealthy exercise that people are sort of doing. Is it for
yeah.
clout? Some people, yes, and unfortunately it is for clout, it is for likes, but it's people reaching out in a way that they kind of know also.
So the way this went down was because of my experience with it, right? I know the difference. I've seen a manic depressive. I've seen a grown man run naked into the middle of the road, stopping a gang fight because he was just manic, right?
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people just don't understand what that fucking means. And it's fine. You don't need to understand. I lived it, so I do understand it, right? But this is why it irks me. I watch these people talk, oh God, I'm so depressed, or this is, I'm like, you have no fucking idea what that means. You're doing this so you
Yeah.
can get fucking followers, and that pisses me off. That really pisses me off, but that is my own, and I can feel you therapizing me right now. That is my own bullshit that I need to deal with, right? I can't paint everybody with the same brush. I get that there are people that out there that really have got issues, and I do
But
understand that.
if I can jump in, think of something like manic depression is the more accurate word, for example, is bipolar mood disorder. So,
Yeah,
there's two poles. One is manic. It's,
yeah,
this really, really elevated mood and with a lot of other symptoms. And the other side is a depressive mood. Um,
yeah.
some people
We
just
just
have
can't
the
get out of bed.
depressed
You
mood.
just stay in the dark.
Eh? So, but also some people don't present with a certain, severity that other people present. So
Mm,
I think, we shouldn't just say somebody has to be really, really depressed. So clinical depression is not the wrong word, but the accurate word, again, I suppose, according to current times, is major depressive disorder. So the
yeah,
reality is people may meet the criteria for it. Having said that, it may not be severe like somebody that is, in a hospital who literally had to be admitted just because
Yeah.
they were almost vegetative, if you had to put it like that.
Well, so if I can, so share with my late father, because of the issues that he had, and I don't mind speaking about it anymore. I don't mind. That's the way. This was life. I mean, I used to. He got sick once upon a time, right? And he was on a certain medication, and he was also alcoholic. But short story was that he drank to mellow himself out. He couldn't deal
Yeah,
with the highs, he couldn't deal with the lows, so he just kept on fucking drinking so that he would be in the middle all the time. At least he knew this was going to be my state. If I keep on drinking, this is where I'll be, you know? But eventually they found a psychiatrist found out that, bro, no, you fucking bipolar, you can't do this cuck all the time. So they
yeah,
prescribed him certain drugs, whatever, which just kept you on a medium, it keeps you meh. It doesn't give you, you don't get extremely happy, but you also don't get extremely sad. So you just coast along life. And that's where he was for a little while. And that was easier. Life was easier with him like that. And I can only imagine that for him, it must have been cuck because you're never really, really happy. But at the
yeah,
same time, it's good because you're never really, really sad, you know? So I've been, I don't want to say fortunate enough, but I've been in this space. I've been fortunate enough to see it, and
yeah,
see what it does. But and it's enabled me to be empathetic to a lot of people that might have had it. But I'm gonna get back to that now. But what I'd like to do is we need to get some. I want to get into some of these people's comments
yeah.
um, on earlier. So let's just go. It's been a Darrell Rueda was talking about you all the time. She was saying a whole lot of stuff about is it Devin, and she made a funny face. I don't know. Devin's asking random bullshit. Sergio was saying some stuff. Brandon Amazan was saying some stuff. We don't care. Theo was saying some crazy stuff. It's crazy. Give me 1 second. There were a few comments that were actually decent in here. Remember where I tagged you? I said, have a look at Mary's comments. Give me a
I need
sec.
to have a look at the comments.
She had a slew of comments, bro. There was a whole lot of stuff in her comments. Where did it go? Did she delete them?
I'm gonna check because I think she had some really good comments that she had made, some
She
really good
did. She had
points.
some. She had
Um,
some proper comments.
one of the can I answer one of the questions that I remember that I thought was a really good question, and it
Yeah.
was by I always wonder am I saying his name right, but it was Dalen Barnes.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah. It's Dylan
I've
Barnes.
got yes, I've got
Dylan
the
Barnes. What
questions
is the world
open.
for depressed?
Um,
Was it dick? Oh, that is a good question. Yeah.
So that was yesterday, yes. So one of the things he asked was, why is the world more depressed than it was a decade ago? And
Yeah.
we were actually somebody and I were chatting about, or Kirsten and I were chatting about it this morning, and I said to her, the reality is the world in its own, has the world has changed a lot in the last 10 years.
Yes.
Let's think of it from a financial point of view. If you earn 50,000 rand, or well, let's even think of like 30,000 rand. If you earned 30,000 rand 10 years ago, you were very comfortable. If you
Yeah.
and salaries haven't increased dramatically in the last 10 years.
Mhm.
And so from a financial point of view, people are really, really struggling to make it these days. And so I generally I don't work in privates. I don't work with people who have medical aid who are able to pay, to see me. People are generally either see me for free or seeing me at a heavily reduced rate. But from a financial point of view, people sometimes have, I'll never forget, one lady saw me and they hadn't eaten for 2 days. So you
Shit.
always wonder, how do you do therapy with somebody that is hungry, somebody that hasn't had
Yeah.
their basic needs met? So
Mm.
from that perspective, people's basic needs are really hindered. or, in terms of what they were compared to 10 years ago. So not just from a financial point of view, but also if you think of it in terms of what we know about depression, there's been a ton of research. The stigma has sort of dwindled, but it's still there. But having said that, you know, the resources are more accessible, but also we understand it and we're more willing to approach people. So, for example, if more people are coming to seek help, the reality is more people will probably be diagnosed with it also.
Yeah.
But I just think, the view of the world. So I think of depression as a perception-based disease. Partly, it's not just about perception, but if I view my world as terrible, then I'm going to experience that, and ultimately it's going to affect my quality of life. It's going to affect my mental state. So,
Mm.
if you kind of start putting all these factors together, you would say people's view of life is a bit more shit than what it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But
True. So
ultimately, you also have a lot of people who sit there and say life isn't as good, but it's not just these factors that we're focusing on. The quality
yeah,
of life can be improved by focusing on different parts of it also. So other people adapt a lot better.
this is true, and I think it comes down to a lot of what your socioeconomic status comes into this in a big way. And this is way too much in this podcast to sort of get into those things right now, but the short story is there are people that are really struggling, and we can't sort of I go through a certain amount of things the same way you go through a certain amount of things and everybody else, but I might handle this a little bit differently to the way you handle this because you might have had experience in handling this kind of thing. So it seems easier for you, and I might struggle handling the same exact thing. It doesn't mean I'm any worse off or better than you. It's just that you've already been through this, so you've got the experience, so you can carry on. So a lot of people uh, during their lives have certain experiences that make it easier for like to deal with and say, look, I've been here before, that didn't work, so let me try this now. you know Whereas with other people, it's I've never done this before, so I'm gonna panic, I'm gonna freak out now. Um, but coming back to what was it like 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, where we earned a certain amount of money and life was good. I mean, just because we had the money or we had the financial means, which makes a big difference to how we perceive life, because that's basically it gives us a home, it gives us our security, it gives us our food, it gives us shelter and all sorts of things. That makes sense. So our life is better, our life is just easier, But regardless of we might have all those things. We'll have all this money. We have all the money. We have all the security. We have the car. We have the job. But your husband is still giving you mad cuck at home. Your husband is cheating. Your husband is doing all sorts of things, and vice versa. The money is not always the thing that makes things better, you know? So my question is, was it really better 15, 20, 30 years ago? Um, or is it that we are just seeing more of it now because of social media? Social media has turned the volume up on everything,
Yeah.
right? Was there always depression? Was there always sadness? And was there always economic inequality? And all of these funny things that, the volume is turned up on everything now. Is just because these things were always there, we're just hearing them now, or is it harder now than it was then?
So obviously, as I said earlier, it doesn't just, it's not just about finances. It's about a multitude of factors, and I'm probably not touching on all of them. What I'm finding with, I'm gonna, and again, these are those awkward conversations, is that the current generation isn't as equipped to deal with difficulties as much as what people were maybe 15, 20 years ago. Um, you know, I'm trying to think of an example of something I saw. Um, So recently I saw a young woman. I say young, she was 18, and for her, for example, she blamed her relationship with somebody and said, my phone is hacked, and this is, my ex-boyfriend, and this is why I need a phone. And I was like, are you maybe just using that as an example to get a new phone, and say maybe you hacked your phone because, maybe you can just change your credentials on your current phone and
Yeah.
then you can't access anything. And she said, oh, I didn't think of that. And I was sitting there kind of like
Okay.
thinking, but like, isn't that obvious? But the reason I use this as an example, maybe it's a junk example, but like, I kind of thought this would be the obvious thing. But this I'm finding is that the so-called obvious isn't as obvious as we actually think it is. Or,
Mm.
we say common sense isn't always as common. Now, again, I'm not criticizing people, but the reality is, I think what was common sense maybe 15 years ago isn't as
Mm.
common nowadays. But I can't say we can't plaster everybody with that. I
Yeah.
think there are still good people out there who are well equipped to deal with difficulties. But I'm finding that, the generation of yesteryear seemed a lot more equipped. Another person can argue and say, but Brett, they are older. But the reality is there are older people who are also very ignorant to what would be helpful, so they lack insight.
Mm.
But again, coming back to that, did those problems exist? I think yes, they did. I think they existed. I think they just presented very differently.
Yeah.
I think was it. I mentioned to somebody else. In actual fact, it was a video I posted last week on Facebook, and I said, you know, we are very quick to say to people, everybody's coping, they're doing this. But my view is, if you are, people of yesteryear, they used to drink a lot. For example, we don't deal with the problem, we just drink. Now, no, no, but but if you think of it,
Why,
males were
why are you
told
throwing
just
me
drink,
smoke, bro? Why
and
are you throwing me smoke? It's the one night that I get to drink some stuff. You're throwing smoke at me.
no, 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 so, but, but you get what I'm saying, and then that
Yeah.
same person would be argumentative with his wife, or or vice
Mm.
versa. And the thing is, then you start looking and you dissecting it and saying, but perhaps maybe people weren't coping back then. The
Mm.
uncle that was sitting in the yard smoking white pipe, was that, and every day, was that perhaps
Yeah.
something he was doing because he wasn't coping? Or
Mm.
this and that one was always argumentative. Perhaps maybe, it's not about saying he had a mental health disorder, or mental illness, but, was that person maybe not in the healthiest of states? So again, if you look back at it and you really look at different factors, then you can
Mm.
kind of start saying, the way it presented 20 years ago was maybe different, and it's
Mm.
kind of evolved now. And I'm sure in 5 to 10 years, you're going to see something a bit different also.
Definitely, 100%. I mean, the world has changed really quickly. Look, if you look at 50, 60, and 100 years ago, the world changed in little increments. It changed a little bit. The minute technology came, the world it exploded. The
Yep.
world exploded in a big way. And I just think that although everything gets louder, doesn't matter what we're talking about, everything just got louder really quickly. And I just think this is a very special time for everybody, and a lot of stuff has changed. So, what I actually want to do is I just want to go into the comments here, B. We're just talking about therapist versus psychologist. Psychologist, what's the difference besides degrees? The place in Arbs called Counseling Hub. That's the one. So Mary Ann is that earlier on in this conversation, right? I was talking about a spot that you could go to if you didn't have a lot of money, you were a bit strapped for cash, but you needed some sort of help with a therapist or something. If you were feeling unhappy or stressed or whatever, to a point where you couldn't function in like day-to-day life, all you had in your mind was heaviness and stuff. There is a place that you could go to, and Mary Ann mentioned it. It's called the Counseling Hub. It's in Observatory. I'll post the link a little bit later on, but you guys can check that out. Um, Bradley de Villiers says, okay, good question. Bradley de Villiers is asking, is it a known fact that depression is hereditary? Is that a thing? I'm
But
asking.
it is.
Bradley. Hereditary. Like if
Um,
my mom or dad was depressed, am I gonna get it? Am I gonna be depressed?
Look, so the research does show that, to an extent, it can be genetics.
Okay.
So I would say that one is more predisposed to having something like, for example, schizophrenia, bipolar mood disorder, and even anxiety or depression. But it's not just about genetics. So if you think of something like anxiety, anxiety is generally something people experience based on their worry, based on their perceived inability to cope with certain experiences. Having said that, that same value system may be instilled into kids, for example.
Hmm.
And so the parents' own anxiety may be kind of imposed onto the kids. So
Okay.
I would say, it's not just, it is genetics, or there's an hereditary predisposition, but I think it's also, in terms of the socialization, and again, there's so many other factors that predisposes people to mental illnesses.
Okay. So, um, hereditary, very, very possible. All right. That's Bradley's question. So Natasha Peterson is asking us, what are some basic coping mechanisms when facing a life challenge, specifically if you are not yet comfortable to discuss with people?
Hmm.
Would you like me to?
That's a
You
good
want me to
question.
repeat it? Eh?
This is a bloody good question.
That's a very good question. So good that I didn't understand what the fuck she's talking about. Natasha, what are you? So I'm going to repeat this, right? And maybe from, look, you are a lot more learned than I am, and I don't know if I can understand this correctly. She's asking, what are some basic coping mechanisms when facing a life challenge, specifically if you are not yet comfortable to discuss with people?
Yeah.
I don't know if you
So,
understand that because I fucking don't.
so my view on the question is like you don't want to discuss your difficulties with other people yet. You're not prepared to do that.
Mm,
But having said that, I think I used to, if I had to take myself, from when I started my career almost 12 years back, is that I would also say to people, share, it's good to speak to people. And I've now gone to this a sort of point of view where I say, before you speak to people, choose your people correctly. Take the time to choose people that you trust.
yeah.
It's all good, like I sit here and I share and say, Jason, this and that. And then I walk away. And what do I actually walk away with? So
Mm,
I can share with people, but if those people, one, aren't listening, then that isn't helpful. So,
yeah.
in terms of answering that question, in terms of coping mechanisms, I'm going to say choose people that actually listen, not somebody that you say, things are really difficult at work, and the person's response is, yes, but you must change this, and maybe you must wake up early, and you must. That's bullshit. That doesn't
Yeah,
help because that comes
of
across as
course.
quite prescriptive. And
Yeah.
for me,
And
what is more
judgmental.
helpful is when somebody says, "What are you finding difficult?" And that and the problem is when we say things like this, and people say, "Ah, fuck, man, you soft," or
Yeah,
buttercup or whatever. And that's the
exactly.
reality. And it's not about being soft. It's about saying, hold on, but I don't want you to tell me. If I needed you to tell me, then I probably wouldn't share it with you. So
Mm,
choose wisely. That is probably one of the best coping mechanisms I can say. The other
okay.
thing is it's okay to seek professional help. Now,
Yeah.
as obvious as that may seem, the reality is we are often worried about, what are people going to say? So if I go and see, so a lot of people know me at the hospitals or at least the areas. And so there's like this perception if I go see Brett, what are
Mm,
people going to think? And
mm.
so I
Oh,
tell
okay.
people, instead of people saying, you're mad to go see him, kind of say to them, we need to change this and say, what, that person's actually really, they're helping themselves because
Mm,
they are addressing challenges in their life or
yeah.
they making sure that they are healthy, because if
Yeah.
I had diabetes, I'm pretty sure nobody's going to, criticize me and saying, oh, I see, stop drinking so many sugary drinks. Or people aren't going to say, oh, but I see he's back at, the doctor for his medication
Yeah.
for diabetes. So
Because that's just
it's okay
normal.
to reach out for help. So that is my second tip. Other thing is things like journaling, sitting down and really making sense of what's happening. Now, I don't want to be long-winded in saying this, but a lot of people think of journaling as, today I had a junk day, and fuck, this is what happened, and this person argued with me, and I don't feel like doing this. That I don't think that is a helpful way. It's not a bad
Mm,
way, but I think for me, if I think of journaling, I think of this is what happened today. So this is the
mm,
scenario. I had a crap day. I had an argument with a person, but with all due respect, I'm not worried about the person. I'm worried about what I felt. So I
mm.
then start asking the question of why did I feel pissed off? Why did I feel angry? Is it because I felt dismissed? Is it because I felt neglected, or that the person wasn't hearing me out? So I become my own focus, and then I start
Yeah.
thinking of, okay, so how am I going to resolve this? Not with that person, but how am I going to resolve it for myself? So journaling is also a really good thing. And then the basic things, look after yourself, get enough sleep, get enough nutrition, um, maybe take a time out if needed. I know my friends don't like sleep. There's the hashtag, don't sleep. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
No
don't look up,
sleep, no
go
sleep.
sleep.
Fucking
Yeah,
hashtag. Team sleep.
yeah. And I'm like, you know what? I've been up for very long periods. I mean, when I was studying, I remember a time when I had visual hallucinations. I'd been up so long studying. But
Shit.
for me, it's also, when that happened, it was kind of like, you need to go sleep,
Yeah.
you know. But this is the thing, we kind of like, we need to be okay with looking after ourselves, and that in its
Yeah.
own is a coping mechanism. Is in
Mm.
actual fact, it's okay to look after yourself, but we don't believe that.
Yeah. No, we believe what everyone else tells us. No, you've got to grind, fucking work. You don't
Yeah,
need sleep. Sleep when you're dead and all that bullshit. But, when you 19, 20, 21, that shit is fine. We can do that cut. But 45, 46 years old, like, fuck that, bro. I need to be in bed at 10 o'clock because otherwise I'm going to fucking die. That's how I feel. So, um, with what you were saying earlier on with how you actually cope and how you get through certain things, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm hoping people are actually listening. And Natasha's on there asking certain questions, which I really appreciate. We're going to go on to another one now. Michael Tennant, trying to get his standing already started. What is Bradley de Villiers is saying, Mary Ann, can you top up that glass? Bradley, I can top up my own glass, bro. I don't need anybody to help top up glasses. I'm just going to go back down. I'm going on some of the earliest questions. Bradley de Villiers. Okay, so Bradley de Villiers is actually bringing up a question here, or he's actually making a statement saying, remember how earlier on we were talking about the difference between psychiatrists and psychologists? He's saying that the therapy and medication is there to help us cope with these changes. We don't have to do it alone. That's what Bradley is saying, and that's basically what you were saying earlier on, that a therapist can help you get to a certain point, but ultimately, if it's something that can't help you, the psychologist can prescribe medication to sort of help you get to the next step. If it's something that a therapist can't do, is that right?
so I mean, if I look at it like this, a psychiatrist can prescribe, I can't, but it's okay
Mm,
to access different resources.
mm,
um, you're doing this for you first and
yeah.
foremost. I know a lot of people say I'm doing this for my family and I'm seeking the help, but the reality is you should be doing this for you and your health first
Mm,
and foremost. And it's completely fine to access, help. Um, it's not about necessarily what other people think you should be doing. So I hope that answers that question because I couldn't hear so well.
No, I think it does answer the question. Um, let's just go on with a couple of other ones. Devin Wayne Saunders says, in the last 10 years, life is forever evolving. Financially, prices have increased, our salaries have stayed the same. Emotional, Emotionally, social media has impacted our state of mind. It's easier to watch the Jones and compare. It's easier to cheat. Hold on, to see more. It's easier to cheat. It's easier to fall out of love. Mentally, we have such more pressures today compared to yesteryear. That's what Devin says. I'm going to go back. The pandemic also played a part. We never grieved properly. We never said our goodbyes. Um, People lost jobs. Our mental state was compromised during this time. So, yeah, Devin is he's saying a couple of things about how it was during the pandemic and things, and how, you and I were chatting about earlier on about how things have changed compared to 50 years ago and how they are now. So we were just saying that, and yeah, the pandemic has done a lot. We've all lost people where we couldn't go to funerals, we couldn't express our condolences and that kind of thing in the way we always would. So that has definitely made a difference. Um, Give me one second. Let's go back here. Natasha's in these. Natasha is saying that after these intense COVID periods we have endured and experienced the past few years, it has brought up to light the need that we need to value and nurture keep people in life. So we have a support system that is genuine and real. Of course, seek professional support if you feel that this is the correct course of action for oneself. 100%, Natasha. I completely agree. So I want to go back to something you said earlier on. So in and I bring this up as a joke. In 2021, is bro, when was COVID? Because my timeline is fucked. When was COVID? When did we have like
2020
the
and
major lockdown?
2021.
21. Okay. So I always say, and I make the fucking joke that I would gladly relive 2021 when I physically had COVID and I was sick in fucking bed. I would gladly do that before I do 2020 again. Because in my life, right, 2020 was a fuck up. 2020 was a fucking hell of a year, and I never ever want to go through it ever again. But we were talking about therapists and psychologists earlier, and I don't mean to. I'm not. I don't want to shit on your career because what you do is important. People need what you do, and people need to see you, right? But what I've realized with regards to therapy is Mary Ann said something about the Spartan Observatory. I was there. I went to those people, and because I was at the fucking end, bro. I was hanging on a thread. I couldn't go to the next day. It was fucked. So what I did was I went to that spot. But the short story of this is that whatever I was going through, right? I was trying to figure out, how do I get through this? How do I just get to the next step? How do I get to the next day without doing something stupid? Do you know what helped? And I know this sounds strange and it's not for everybody. This is just what happened to work for me because I never had a whole lot of cash. I couldn't afford therapy. I couldn't do all sorts of things. But, bro, for real, what helped a lot was just talking. Just talking. Like you mentioned, journaling. Journaling will help a lot. And I did that, right? A lot of, if you've got something that's on your mind, something that's murdering you inside, something that's killing your soul, if you could just either talk about it or get it out in some way, that is gonna help. It's gonna take the edge off. So what I ended up doing is the year of 2020, I lost my shit. I just went fucking wild over social media, but it might have not been the right way. Um, Thinking about it, I should have done it. I should have handled it a little bit differently, things that were going on in my life at the time. But what that did was on social media, because I've been here so long, there's a lot of people that I know on Facebook and on various social media platforms, and they reached out and they said, "Bro, what the fuck is going on? Are you okay?" And then it turned into DMs and WhatsApp and social media and things. And by doing that, um, I don't want to say it fixed me, but it helped. It really helped actually um, take the edge off a lot of the pain, and that helped. And chatting with a therapist at the observatory thing helped a lot. So a lot of it comes down to just being able to chat with somebody and talk with somebody that will listen to you, with an unbiased opinion. Does that make any kind of sort of sense?
It makes a lot of sense, you know. I think expressing oneself in its own way in a safe environment with somebody that is not judgmental. But even if it's not with somebody, you know, it can be expression through art, it can be through music,
Mm,
it can be journaling, or it can be, you know, talk therapy. Um, but just expressing what we feel, but in a healthy way, it does, it's relieving. You know, it does
mm,
help tremendously. Some people go to the gym, for example, but I think, you
yeah.
know, one has to ask the question of when does it become unhealthy? You know, so yes, speaking about things can be healthy. Um, but I also think that when we get to a point now, somebody said to me the one day, I say one day, it was even today again, somebody else had mentioned it and said, it doesn't help when I sit here blaming people. It doesn't help when
Mm,
I sit here just complaining about things. And I must be honest, I quite like that they said that, because therapy isn't helpful when we just sit, you know, unpacking. We have to also
mm,
take some form of accountability. You know, the
100%.
reality is somebody may have hurt me, but I
Mm,
can retell the story of me being hurt and hurt and hurt. In actual fact, I have been through some really um, crappy experiences. I can retell that story for 20 years, or I can start asking myself the question and saying, how am I going to change how I respond emotionally to it? And
mm,
for me, that's a better question. You know, the reason
mm,
is I'm then starting to say, but I'm not trying to get that person to take accountability and change my life. I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it and change it for myself, because it's my life.
totally.
And, you know, one of the crappiest things to say to people is the people harm you, but you're responsible for your healing.
Yeah,
You know, and
true. So,
so I even think of like the comments made by Devon, and I think you said Elizabeth.
there's no Elizabeth here, bro, but
Oh, no,
okay.
no, sorry,
Let's
what
just
am I
assume there
thinking?
was a
Sorry,
Elizabeth
Mary
here.
Ann, whoever
Yes,
Elizabeth,
Mary.
maybe Elizabeth said
Yeah,
it too. But the thing is, you know, the last 2 years have been difficult, and
yeah,
if I think of COVID, I you won't believe how many people were accessing our services, but at the same time, how many people weren't. You know, we had
yeah.
actually set up, and I mean, this speaks to one of our other questions. We had set up helplines, we had set up free systems for people to access, you know, via video call, via you know, voice calls. People
Yeah.
weren't accessing it. You know, the counseling hub and places like Cape Mental Health, they were
Mm,
overloaded, overburdened with,
really?
well, I don't like using the word because nobody was a burden, but there just wasn't availabilities for people to see anybody.
Mm,
I mean, I think of my life. I promise you, I was some days on the phone from 5 o'clock in the morning through till 12 the night, even 2 the morning.
Jesus.
I remember 2020. I promise you, I was that week of Easter, Easter Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the Monday. I was almost on the phone the whole day, every day. And I sat back and I looked at it and I just thought, this is bizarre. What is happening? But people weren't coping. And I
Yeah.
sat there thinking, well, I can help. Let's be there.
Mm,
And sorry, I digress from the initial point of, you know, speaking can be helpful.
mm.
Um, but I think people were finding it helpful. The reality is I was slowly burning out.
So, who does the therapist go to? I mean, you, right? So, not, your job is fixing people. Let's be blunt. Your job is fixing people, right? Um, when you need to get fixed, do therapists have therapists? So what do you do to sort of get through to the things? If things are a little bit fucking heavy for you and things are getting crazy, what do you do?
Um, so it's a good question. So I do have somebody that I see, and
Mm-hmm.
somebody that I go and unpack with. I also have people, at work that I see, for what we call supervision, where I can kind of discuss one difficult cases, so that I kind of feel more equipped to deal with things. But
Okay.
if I really feel like it, then that is a workspace. I don't think that's the space to speak about my personal stuff. So I do go and see somebody. And I'm okay with
Okay.
actually sharing that, is that I see somebody not for the sake of the fact that I am this person who doesn't have it together. And even if I didn't have it together, I would still gladly tell the world I'm going and see somebody, because
Yeah.
what I need from somebody is somebody that is blunt, somebody that gives it to me 100% raw,
Yeah.
somebody that doesn't hold back at all. And that works for me. So when people make remarks, I don't easily get offended, or at least I would say
Mm.
today, I don't get offended by the honesty, at least in therapy, because the person that says it directly is somebody that I trust. And that is the type of therapist I am. A lot of people say, I'm very direct, I'm very blunt, but I'm also
Mm.
very respectful at the same time. So do I go and see somebody? Absolutely, I have to, because, to sit with what people share with me,
Mm.
and not see somebody, I promise you, it is, I would almost dare say it's horrendous to sit with all that information, and not have a space to actually safely offload it.
I think that you more, and people in your profession probably need therapy more than anybody else does, mainly because you've got to sit with the problems and the baggage of hundreds of people on a daily basis. And, you know, I don't think the human mind can fucking handle that kind of thing. You need someone to speak to, to be able to get through it as well, because it's tough, bro. I mean, look at it this way. If you look at things like the police, right?
Yeah.
The police see such horrible things on a daily basis. They see this shit all the time, every single day. The things that normal people just don't see. We see our normal stuff during the day and it's fine, but they see horrible things all the time, and they need to unpack that somewhere. And that's with people like you. But then now you sit with what they've dealt with, and you've got this in you having to deal with this now, and then shit, you have to go speak to somebody else. So I completely understand that, bro. I mean, I think that you guys need that more than, I don't say more than anybody else, but you do need that kind of, you need some kind of a release, someone to talk to, someone to be able to get through this with and say, listen, I've had a rough day today. These things happened. These people told me these things, so I don't I couldn't do what you do. I could not. There is no fucking way. I would lose my shit. I would absolutely lose my shit.
You say
What I
that,
want to do.
but I think, there's a space that suits everybody. So, for example, not everybody wants to be a therapist in an office. Perhaps they would do really well at research, for example. If I think of when I worked in forensics, for example, that is probably where I heard the most violent and graphic stories. And
Yeah,
I promise you, it was a short stint in that. It was only a 3-month rotation, but
yeah,
it's something that I still remember. Sometimes word for word, almost
yeah.
10 years later,
And
of
it's something
something
you
that
don't want
I
to do. It's something you weren't interested in getting into. That you're like, fuck this. I don't want to do this. No.
don't know. If anything, it's probably one of the areas that I would do,
Oh, really?
because it is so unpredictable. So it makes
Yeah.
it interesting. I say unpredictable and interesting, but not in a sense of like I'm pissed, I want to know. But
Mm.
at the same time, somebody did say to me, Brett, isn't it difficult being a colored psychologist, because you just want to share with everybody and you are pissed, you want to know by nature. And maybe, so yes, when there's when there's a bad forensic case, bad in the sense of what happens, um, one, you just sit there and your curiosity takes you off. But then you also think like, shit, this is like a lot to take in. And the reality is, there's been days where I've come home and thought like, I wish I didn't know this. And you come home crying, or you drive
Yeah.
home crying because
Yeah.
you just wish you didn't hear somebody experience the trauma that they did, or listen to how somebody murdered or raped somebody.
Ah,
Um, I
Jesus.
promise you, and I put it like this. If you read things in the newspaper or you even watch things in a movie, think of Saw, and then you think of how graphic it is, and then you
Yeah.
think what really happens in real life probably wouldn't be able to be put in a movie or into the
No,
newspaper.
there's no fucking way. So
Because
I've
people,
got another story, but I mean, I do it for a living. I sell cars. It's not a
yeah,
big fucking thing. I sell fucking cars, so do a million other people. But when I do so, when I chat to people, I love speaking to people. I love speaking to you. I just love talking to people and find out what their life is about and what they do. So this is about, it was before COVID, right? I just got into selling pre-owned cars, and I was chatting to a lady. She came to look at a car. Hi, what's your name? Da, 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 da. We're chatting, and going. So we're going on a test drive. She was driving. She was buying a Kia Picanto in cream. This is how this memory is stuck in my head. She was buying a Kia Picanto. What she was doing at but she had an American accent, so I like figured out, okay, so you aren't South African, but you've got an American passport and blah 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 blah. You're working down here now. She was at the time, she was training baristas. Right, she was training people to use these barista machines and make the funny fucking maple leaves in your coffee and cup. She was doing that. So I'm like, so we were just chatting, and I was asking her, is this your profession? Is this what you do? But this lady actually worked for for what the fuck is that? I can't remember the name of these people. What's the name of these people that in politics they are sort of they're the Switzerland of politics. What, NATO? Is it no, not NATO? I forget. But anyway, she was working for a massive worldwide organization that wasn't governed by any particular political party, but they like sort of helped everybody out. But she was involved in the people that, or the organization that helped with human trafficking, right? It was her job to find out where people were human trafficked to, involved in negotiations to get these people back. And this was her job. And I was like, and she was explaining to me, and says, listen, when you hear human trafficking on the radio or you hear human trafficking on the television, and you see these documentaries, that is 1% of what human trafficking is all about. She says she was involved in actually getting people out of certain places from human trafficking and how fucked up it is. And what I'm getting at with this comment is that she had so much to deal with. She saw, possibly in my mind, the worst of human nature, and she had to deal with this on a daily basis, and she just decided, fuck that. She doesn't want anything to do with this anymore, and she started selling and training people to be baristas. So it's um it's a huge thing, and that's coming back to, what does she have to deal with on a daily basis, you know, just to get by from day to day. And now you still got to go home, and you've got to be a regular person with your husband, and you've got to be a regular person with your kids. It's absolutely fucking crazy. So I just want to recheck these comments. Um, I'm going through here now, and it's Bradley saying some things. Mary Ann is saying, during the pandemic and people working from home, a lot of companies did not respect the 9 to 5, and people were working all day and night, and I think people are mentally drained. What do you think, the did the pandemic change much within the within with people sort of dealing with what's like, it was a big change. People going from working in office to now working at home. Financially, yeah, it might have made sense, but mentally, did it have a big effect on people?
working from home, it's it's a good question, Because personally, I believe you should still let people work from home, but there should be boundaries that you respect. So again, the
Mm.
research showed that when people worked from home, they were actually working harder,
Yeah.
that more was expected, and they were actually working longer hours. Now, having said that, I still believe people should work from home, but then you should give them various resources to have one, and respect their timeline. So, if, for example,
Mm.
if your day starts at 8 o'clock, there were people
Yeah.
expecting people will to say, but you work from home, just get me the information by 7:30 because it's not
Yeah.
like you're traveling to work, so I'm
Mm.
sure you can do it. Or when it was lunchtime, for example, when you're at work and you're on lunch, people see that you are outside. Now there's this
Yeah.
perception, hold on, but you can sit at your computer and still work, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
So there was an expectation that you still work. So how did working from home influence people? The expectation to work was more, but also
Hmm.
people lost interaction. Part of
Yeah.
when I say this, I don't interact with a lot of people in my workspace, but I interact with enough, I guess. But a lot of, sorry, when I say so, I don't, because I'm seeing people, throughout the
Mm.
day. It's not a very social job in the sense that I'm sitting in an office with other people,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So people who were in an office or in cubicles where there were various teams, they no longer had that because they were having to WhatsApp or phone. So you took social interaction away. And let's face it, you can work hard but still be talking shit in the office, for example, and having fun.
Yeah.
Work should be
Mm.
fun.
Yeah.
But that was taken away. But also, I don't think people planned how they could cope from home. So when there were periods when I was working from home and doing teletherapy, I would make sure that between sessions with people, I would actually walk outside, or I would take a break, or I would go and sit with the dog on the
Mm.
stoop. And at lunchtime, I would make sure I close the laptop, I put my phone away. So I needed to set boundaries because I knew nobody else was going to set it.
Mm.
Because I realized early on in the year I was just completely overworked. So yes, people would say, but you were saving in certain aspects. But because we weren't taught essentially how to plan, or we
Mm.
didn't take the time to think, how do we plan to work from home? A lot of people were drained. Again, we saw things like depression, and anxiety just skyrocketing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so in a lot of ways, people struggled because we were also quite cooped up. And I do get that it was for our own safety. Um, COVID was very real and very rampant.
Mm.
So I do believe that initial lockdowns were the intentions were good, but people really, really struggled when they were told, be at home. Um,
Yeah.
because your autonomy is taken away. I don't like being
Mm.
told you can't go to the shop.
Yeah. People are more pissed off because they're like, now you don't tell me what the fuck to do. I will do what I want to do. But now you're being told, no, bro, you gotta suck. You gotta say the fuck at them. You didn't have a choice. This is
Yeah,
what you do, and people didn't like that.
it's basically in a way your basic human rights get taken away. So you get told, well, you're gonna be medically you're gonna be okay. But what about psychologically? What about
Mm.
financially? What about socially? What about
Mm.
your career? You were told. I actually thought about it yesterday or the day before. So from day one, I was allowed to work. There was no break. But I also
Mm.
sat and I thought, what makes them decide my job is more important than your job, so I'm considered essential? I
Mm.
never had a haircut for 2 months, but I consider a haircut essential to me. Um,
I just remember
you
the
know it.
pictures. I don't remember.
When your dog starts chewing on your hair because it's that thick,
Yeah.
you need a haircut. But then you look back and I couldn't buy coasters, but people
Mm.
could go game hunting.
Yeah.
So then you have to start weighing up the priorities, and so this is what people were sitting with. So it wasn't just the sitting at home; it was
Yeah.
how things were dealt with. People were pissed off, to put
Mm.
it mildly.
Yeah.
So So I think our mental health took a massive toll during the lockdown, and we're now seeing the results of people not coping. It was high during
Yeah,
the lockdown, but it has skyrocketed even worse now.
this is true. So a little question I want to get at. So you know how it's like with look, if you're sick, right? You're not feeling like or whatever. Now I can't doctor to because you whatever get it sorted out, go to the doctor, he gives you a fucking pill and you get better, right? But that seems for the longest time that has been the way we deal with things. You know, if you're liquor, you go to the doctor, you get a tablet, you get sorted out, right? Um, it's slowly getting there for mental health, right? What is the story, or how do you feel about the fact that Miriam actually brought this up yesterday? She said that look, in our and it might be in more communities than our colored community, but she was saying that with the colored community, no, especially the religious colored community. So we would think that, listen, I need to speak to someone, a therapist or something, because I'm not doing well, and legit, there's something wrong mentally. I'm not okay. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling suicidal. Whatever the story is, and then auntie and grandma will just see, no, you need Jesus. You need to go pray. You need to go to church. Go talk to the pastor, whatever. Jesus is gonna fix this, man. Fix this. You don't need to go to a fucking psychologist or psychiatrist. Jesus will fix this. Is that still a big thing?
Yes, it is.
Hmm.
So my response to when people have said that, so I've seen a lot of patients where they've actually been told, the pastors have actually said, stop the medication. Don't go and see
Fuck
the
with
psychologist.
Jesus. Fuck
You
these
just need to come
pastors.
to prayer group. And then you had pastors that say, and this is what I agree with, because I actually said to, I'm trying to think, it was somebody at the church, and I said to him, what makes you think that your work, the Lord's work only happens in a church?
Hmm.
And I said to him, don't you think
Yeah.
that perhaps, I was given the opportunity to do the Lord's work, but in a different setting? I'm a religious person. And I said, I'm
Yeah.
in no way here to take away from anything. But I actually I told the priest the one day, priest or pastor, and I said to him, you also need to stay in your lane, essentially. You are good at what you do, but you also need to respect that a psychiatrist knows more about medication than you. And you
Yeah.
are in no way equipped. And I
Reflect
said
on
to
the
him,
priest.
you can't come and dismiss the
Yeah.
fact that somebody else has been given the God-given opportunity to go and
Yeah.
study and interact with people. If you're
Yeah.
a religious person, then you should understand that, we don't
Hmm.
create these opportunities. It is God that gives us these opportunities.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say to them, what I'm able to do is an opportunity to help people. It's just different to your way or method. But we are part of a multidisciplinary approach as opposed to
Hmm.
only you can help them, because that is also creating some sense of anxiety for people. Or we can't say
Yeah.
creating, but it is leading to at least people experiencing that.
I can't believe you flexed that hard on the fucking priest, bro. He must have not been your friend for the longest time.
Look, I mean, people don't like it, but you also, it's essentially just being honest, because obviously not every priest is going to be like that. But again,
Yeah.
you have to be quite firm, because I think this is a career which is strange, because as much as you have to be sensitive, you have to be very, very firm, because if you're not
Yeah.
firm, you will be walked over so badly. And, you think, but for example, in no way was I being disrespectful to the priest or priest pastor, but also needed to say to him, you need to respect that other people are able to also help the same people that you are
Yeah.
attempting to help.
Not the only one. So I think the short message is that if people have got, because that's what people do. Look, if you cash trap, the first thing you're gonna do is go to your priest and you're gonna listen to whatever he tells you. Klar, right? But they need to realize that they are professionals. I mean, the priest or the pastor or whatever can help you in a religious aspect, but someone like you who's literally trained to be able to deal with this is a little bit different. So um, people need to realize that they need to look at both sides of the coin. You know, it works both ways. Um, another question I wanted to ask is, and this is something we chatted about much earlier. What is the difference between being sad, like, I'm sad, and being depressed? How do you know? I mean, some people might think that, just I'm depressed or I'm cuck or whatever, or you're just sad. Is there a trigger? Is there something that you're able to look at and say, look, oh fuck, I need help. What's the story here?
So I'm trying to keep it simple. Sad is one aspect, So, for example, if I wanted a car and they never had it in black, I may be sad that I never got it in black.
Like the
But
Audi
I'm going to be
suspension.
okay. I'm going to be fine. Having said that, depression isn't just a mood. Depression is a set of, anything between 4 to 10 symptoms. It's a
Mm,
combination of various experiences that
mm,
that puts you in a position where we now start saying we think this person has major depressive disorder, or we can diagnose that. So we don't just look at, they look sad. We're looking at, are they looking after their hygiene? Is it affecting their psychomotor? Is there psychomotor agitation, for example? Is it affecting their sleep, their eating? Is it affecting their concentration? Is it affecting their libido? And is it affecting various parts of their life? So you can see how sadness is just one aspect, but whereas depression is a kind of a whole bowl filled with various aspects.
okay. Okay, I understand that. And really, the only way we can figure that out is actually speaking to somebody that knows what they're doing, speaking to somebody like yourself that knows what they're talking about. Because you could just be really fucking sad and think, this is cuck. I don't want to go through tomorrow. I don't want to go to work because I'm super sad. And the sadness is so hard. You could think it's depression, but tomorrow it could change and things could change at work and you'll be okay. So the goal is actually to speak to somebody that knows what they're talking about, that can actually diagnose and see exactly where you are. The same way, and we said it before, the same way that you go to a doctor because you got a feeling somewhere in your body and it doesn't feel strange and you don't know what it is, but you go to the doctor and they'll tell you what it is and you'll get it fixed. It's exactly the same way with anything. And I don't want to say mental illness, although that's the word. You know, anything mental. Like if you're sad for a prolonged period of time, you need to figure out, look, what's making me sad? What's going on? What's happening? Just sit down with yourself and think, look, I need to get this sorted out, so I need to speak to somebody. And that is the next question I want to do in closing. If people are feeling that way, like they're like feeling like, listen, something is not right. I don't know what it is. I feel sad. I feel maybe depressed. I feel anxious. What do they do? What is their first port of call?
Very good question. So, a lot of the times people say there isn't help. And if we do seek help, it's expensive. There's the option to go private, there's the option to go at, heavily reduced rates. And then there's obviously free resources. So for me, if I think of like your private doctor or even at our local clinics, you can walk in and let's start with a private doctor. You can
Hmm.
ask your private doctor, please, can you
You mean
refer
like
me
your
to a
GP, the
psychologist?
guy that would normally go to, that guy?
Yeah, so just your normal GP. Generally speaking, they should have resources. So, for example, if you have sinus problem, then I'm thinking of an example, but if you have a heart problem, your GP is not going to be the one to treat it all the time. They may refer you to a cardiologist, for example.
Mm.
But the point is, they should have a psychiatrist or psychologist that they can refer to. So that's
Yeah.
that's generally simple. Through the government system, you have your local clinics, for example. So
Hmm.
you don't pay to see somebody. Yes, there is a waiting list generally, but if it's somebody that is urgent, we're generally not going to refer somebody that is in a state of complete distress to a psychologist because the psychologist can contain. But if you're in distress, generally therapy isn't going to be fully helpful. So
Mm-hmm.
somebody that is in a space where they are suicidal or really, really severely anxious, we generally would admit them to what we call a district hospital. So, so those options are available. And that can happen through your local clinic and taken there or directly to the district hospital. So, and then what they then do is they refer to the psychologist. And often you get seen a week or two later, depending on availability. So there's this perception that you wait ages. Unfortunately, at
Mm-hmm.
some places you do wait a little bit longer. Um,
Okay.
but I would say that the service is growing as mental health gets more momentum, or at least the buzz around it and the
Mm.
information. And there's a lot happening. I can tell you this, although I can't sit here as a government employer. I was told I'm not allowed to do that because of various things. So I'm not a government employee if anybody asks. But having
Okay.
said that, so there's a lot of things happening. Um, so those are the things you can do to be able to access. So if you feel, just go to your clinic, just go to your hospital. The people that works there, they should know the system well enough to say, of course we can assist you. This is how it can happen. I don't believe that I mean, I don't want to sound negative. Of course, there are certain people that not get turned away, but they sit there and they kind of feel that, I'm not getting the help that I require. Um, we try and do, I know from myself and my service, we really do try our best to make sure that everybody gets help in a way where we don't discriminate, where we respect, but also equal opportunities, for everybody.
Okay. So what I took away from that is that if anybody is feeling um like they're overwhelmed, right, with
Yeah,
some sort of mental anxiety or something, the easiest thing to do might be to first chat to your regular doctor, chat to the guy that you go to when you've got a cold and you've got a fever or whatever, your doctor, and say, look, doc, I'm not feeling too good, something's happening. I'm not sleeping well. I've got a lot of things in my mind. I have suicidal thoughts, whatever it might be.
yeah,
Chat to your doctor first. He'll have the contacts to be able to put you onto somebody that might be able to help you with your problem. Is that correct?
that's correct. Yes.
All right. So, boys and girls, chat to your doctors first. All right. They're going to be able to put you onto who might be able to help you. Um, if it's not them, I want to say tag Brett, but Brett's on someone else's profile right now, so I can't say that.
Uh,
um,
just
so you
sorry, I was going to say, and I would never disclose who. But I get a lot of people that inbox me, for example, on Facebook and say,
mm,
Brett, I need help. And I always say to them, look, you don't need to explain to me what's happening. Um, you just need to tell me who it's for and the age and maybe just a very brief snippet. But
mm,
generally speaking, I don't even need the snippet to say, I'll do a referral for you or I can put
yeah,
you in touch with somebody. Because obviously, if I know people, I can't be seen them. Um,
mm,
so, for example, and I always say this to people, I don't mind being tagged. Also, get a lot of people that will say, Brett, can I share your number with somebody? They maybe just need to speak to somebody.
mm.
Um, yeah, and like I said, again, the government system, and sorry, I did stop you there, but at all the clinics, the aim is to get psychologists or counselors, and even at the hospitals. So if you do need the support, they will assist you and they should assist you.
And in closing, right, but just before we bounce out, so other than just like the doctors, right, I'm gonna maybe tomorrow put a couple of links in the comments over there where people can go to, like the Spot and Observatory and a few others. Off the top of your head, if somebody needed some help and they wanted to, like, tomorrow just go somewhere and say, listen here, Jesus, life is getting rough, something's going on, I don't know what I need to do, I just need to speak to somebody, where do I go to? could they DM you or could they chat to somebody? How would they go about dealing with whatever issue they have?
Look, if somebody needs to be pointed in the right direction, by all means, I don't mind them, sending a message on Facebook. Um, I also don't mind people. I wouldn't say I don't mind people getting my number. I generally just can't answer my phone because if I'm with the
Mm,
patient, I don't even know my phone's ringing because it's on
yeah,
silent.
yeah.
So a direct message, or like I said, access your local health facility because that
Mm,
is where the resources are. Just ask at the reception, and you shouldn't be discriminated or judged.
mm,
Discriminated against or judged when you go and approach them because we are essentially there to help you.
mm.
And
Bro,
sometimes
that
it's
helps.
as simple as that.
Mm. That helps so much. I mean, we actually spoke about so much with regards to mental health. I mean, we never even spoke about the shit that I wanted to talk about. This got so important, and it is important in today's culture. This 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 discussion was important because a lot of people that are going through shit and they have no idea which way to go. So this was important. I mean, I was going to talk about, bro, between you and me, I was literally going to talk about fucking Johnny Depp and Amber Heard and how she shit in the bed and what your psychological, what's the word, interpretation would be on that whole thing. But it's just as well, literally my battery is critically low. Your phone will power off in 30 seconds. Give me just 1 second, 1 second, hold on for me before this dies, and it's gonna die. I'm gonna plug this in. Okay, there we go. But Brett, bro, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you taking out the time to come sit and chat with us and give us a few ideas on how to handle mental health issues if we have them, which way to go, what to do, how to deal with them. And I just hope this, if this helps at least one person, then we've won. So, bro, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for joining us on this journey, even though it was a little bit of a technical, there was some
In the
technical
beginning.
craziness at the beginning.
Yeah. No, thank you, and I enjoyed it. Maybe one day we can do one that's a little bit, that's informative but a lot more fun. I think also I had a lot that I wanted to share just in terms
Yeah.
of things we just don't know, things that are weird, but at the same
Mm,
time isn't. But in no way to try and poke fun or make fun of anybody. But just kind of like everybody thinks this is a serious career. It is, but it can also be a lot of fun, just in terms of really enjoying the space. We try not to speak about mental health, but mental health is just as much a part of us as physical health. And I think it's the time we actually
100%.
start really, really addressing it.
Mm, definitely. I think what we can do next time, because I would love it to be a next time, and I'd love to join you. I love you for you to join us again. But I think next time we're gonna focus in on a particular subject and maybe just discuss that particular one thing. This was a broad stroke of everything mental health. So I really just hope that it helps somebody, and if it did, then we've won. You know.
Yep.
So Brett, bro, thanks so much. I really do appreciate it. Um, Boys and girls, if you guys have got any questions, I want to say I tagged Brett in the post, right? So you can get him on Facebook. So if you've got any questions with regards to this, if you want to know about how do we move from, or how do you get from where you are now, if you've got an issue that you want to discuss, what's the next step? Send him a DM. He can put you in touch with whoever you might want to speak to, and that will definitely help. But boys and girls, thanks so much for tuning in. Brett, bro, you've been amazing. Thanks so much for actually spending some time with us. I do appreciate it, and we will chat again soon.
Thank you very much.